Now we're going to turn our conversation to Detroit and what lessons can we learn from Detroit's ongoing revitalization. Please welcome from our team Stephen Pedigo, Melissa Price, Justin Mast, my longtime friend Randall Fogelman, and Veronika to the next panel to address Detroit's potential as a new center of innovation and entrepreneurship.
Okay, so as Rana said, what we're going to do the next two panel discussions is really sort of shift the conversation to talk a little bit more about Detroit and actually what's happening here in your community. It's a pretty amazing, as I was prepping for the panel, to go through and look at the number of rankings that now look at Detroit and say Detroit's sort of the center of entrepreneurship and innovation. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and we've got a terrific panel with us today. So just some really quick introductions, and then we'll jump right into the questions and really just sort of have a dialogue. So the first panel we have is Melissa, who's sitting here in the middle with us. Melissa is the CEO of dPOP, a commercial industrial design, interior design firm that is focused on reinforcing their clients' culture and design. She's also the director of facilities and business for Quicken Loans. What's one of the cool things, there are many cool things about Melissa, but one of the cool things is that under her leadership, Quicken Loans actually was named one of the coolest 25 spaces by Fortune. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
We've also got Randall Fogelman joining us as well. Randall is the Vice President of Business Development for the Eastern Market. Many of you know the Eastern Market. Randall is responsible for recruiting new vendors, managing renovation initiatives, and the economic development activity throughout the market. So thank you, Randall, for joining us as well. Our third panelist, sitting on his own seat, is Justin Mast. Justin is an entrepreneur and designer, and really is sort of interesting background, this idea of design and architecture together. And now Justin has launched many startups, but now is the managing director for M1 DTW, a Detroit-based design firm, who, by the way, firm did a lot of the branding and design that you've seen today. So thank you, Justin and team.
Nice work.
And then our final panelist is Veronika Scott, who is the founder of the empowerment firm. And as someone like myself who has been focused on the revitalization of inner cities and distressed communities, your work very interesting to me in the sense of the idea of the empowerment plan was this idea of bringing homeless women together to produce coats for folks living on the streets, give them the opportunity to earn money, find a place to live, and earn back their independence. Talk about a pretty remarkable mission. She's also probably the most accomplished of all of us, I'm joking, winning the JFK New Frontier Award and was recently named one of Forbes 30 under 30 social entrepreneurs. So that's our panel, an esteemed group for today's conversation. So Melissa, let's start with you. You're on the hot seat first.
Okay.
I'm curious to know, how would you characterize Detroit's startup community? And specifically, as Detroit has revitalized, as we've heard a lot about the revitalization of Detroit, how has that energy sort of changed?
So I think from our perspective, we definitely have a unique opportunity as being part of Quicken Loans and now being a startup ourselves with dPOP. We have a unique opportunity experience on both sides, both participating and doing business with startups in our community as well as being a startup ourselves. And I think that it's this amazing creative energy. There's so much opportunity across all platforms. So whether it's an artist studio and gallery that we're visiting, a new trade that's popping up, there's definitely this sense of community and how can we support each other and grow. And I think that is what's really cool.
So what you're seeing is sort of this idea of entrepreneurs and founders of organizations coming across industries to really sort of mix and mingle, this idea of collision of ideas.
Without question, absolutely. And I think that there's such a tremendous opportunity and respect for everyone's craft. And, from that maker community of what Detroit has been built on, that, whether you're a restaurant entrepreneur and how do we support you in that, or, tomorrow we're having Mac Shack for lunch. So, it's just everything and how can we support each other.
So Justin, you've been an entrepreneur, you've founded several companies and have been in this sort of world for a while here in Detroit. When you think about Detroit and maybe you look at other places, other communities, startup communities, what do you think sort of sets Detroit apart from other cities?
Well, I think doing business here in Detroit is inherently spatial, and that's probably one of the most unique things. I think there's this idea that space is accessible here, that you can come and be a part of it. It's buildings, it's neighborhoods. Detroit sort of brings out the inner builder or architect in a lot of people. And it's through that lens that we start to see how a lot of people are operating here in Detroit. And I think it's through that lens we can see some of the really unique challenges to starting a business here.
Yeah. One of the things that I find very interesting about the sort of Detroit entrepreneurial community is it differs from other places, is this idea of impact on community, right? Folks are really focused on what type of impact they'll have on their community. And Randall, you work with lots of different entrepreneurs and vendors at the Eastern market. How important from your perspective has these entrepreneurs and these makers been to the revitalization of your community?
I think they're incredibly important. Going back, I moved downtown in 1994, and in 2000, I was working the Eastern Market in a different role. I was working at a spice company, and I started something called the Detroit Spice Company, a product line celebrating the city. And there were very few food products about the city. Pure Detroit was a store in the Fisher Building, and they had Red Pelican mustard and Detroit Spice Company and some Saunders. And then, starting the Eastern Market in 2007, we started recruiting those jams and jellies and salsas, and it took about 2.5 years to kind of fill up, and now we get over 130 applications a year for those spots. So I really think, the turning point was the economy. People started to realize how important it was to buy local and support local, and then a lot of people had, career changes. I've been laid off 3 times from the auto industry. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to, make that barbecue sauce that my family tells me is wonderful.
So folks really sort of what you're seeing maybe is this sort of taking advantage of this sort of self-made entrepreneurial spirit that's sort of throughout the city.
And now the resources are here. We partner with Michigan State Product Development Center. They actually have someone stationed in our office. It's there to help food entrepreneurs. There's Food Lab. We actually have Detroit Kitchen Connect, which is a network of kitchens that are available to food entrepreneurs. So we've kind of taken it to the next level.
Yeah. So Veronika, much of your work is about impact, right? I mean, when you think about an organization like yours, impact is one of the key pieces. When you think about entrepreneurs and startups having an impact on Detroit and addressing some of the challenges that you're seeing, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are saying, man, I really want to make a difference in my community. I really want to have that impact.
I think there's a couple of things. I know I wouldn't have been able to start the empowerment plan in any other city, period. I know that without the community and the support that we've gotten from small other entrepreneurs that were starting up at the same time to large corporations that in any other city wouldn't have paid attention to us. But I think that idea of collaboration was really strong when I started. But starting off small, I think there's a lot of members of the community in Detroit that don't think that they can make a big impact, that they can just do one small thing. And when I started, I didn't think I would be reaching tens of thousands of people. I was like, all right, I've got this group around NSO, and I'm gonna talk to them and I get like 25 coats made. And that's huge. That was the biggest deal for me. And I think starting out small and just not waiting. We have a really good opportunity right now. So starting small, there's a lot of people that are surrounding the city, whether from outside of Michigan for the first time, that are really excited about what's going on here, that are willing to help back you and make your idea much better than you could have even imagined. And if it wasn't for people in the city, the empowerment plan wouldn't be what it is today, but it was grown with the population that I started it with, and yeah.
As you look to sort of scaling, and you think about sort of just from the the initial startups phase, but even moving from the scaling of the organization, what advice would you have as you sort of, if you have a room of entrepreneurs and you're saying, here's the things to think about as you scale your business in Detroit, what would come to mind, good or bad?
Well, scaling's hard. We're doing that. We're doing that right now. We've gone from the phase of we're trying to prove that yes, you can go into shelters and hire people, and yeah, we can make this coat. That was the last 3 years, and we know we can do that. So much so that other companies want to go into shelters and are to hire people. But now it's the next phase for us. It's how can we help people move on in the community to other jobs. And so we're on a path of growing a lot right now as well. And scaling is difficult, but I think you have to look even beyond Detroit. What is something that the rest of the world could learn from Detroit? What is something that other cities will look at ours and go, oh my God, that's an amazing idea that we want globally, that we want nationally. So it's at the point of scaling, it's like kind of thinking big. How can your company not just work in this ecosystem, but beyond?
Yeah. Now, Melissa, you're in an interesting role because you're running your own company and you have this relationship with Quicken Loans. You're kind of straddling between the two. What we would call these sort of anchor institutions or these anchor companies. And I think what's really interesting about Detroit is there are a lot of these anchor sort of companies here. When you think about major companies here. Thoughts or maybe insights or advice for maybe entrepreneurs that are in the audience and thinking about, man, I really want to tap into some of these large companies. How can entrepreneurs here in Detroit better tap into these larger companies that we have here in the community?
I think there's a tremendous opportunity, and especially in our city, there is a real passion for Detroit to Detroit from a business standpoint, even Metro Detroit to Detroit. And I think that we're very much on a even global scale. A lot of companies and businesses coming through our offices, coming through our spaces, coming to our city, and you heard a lot of that today. And I think that what is so important is don't be afraid for the ask. What is the business need, or how can you connect? Every business has so many needs. That while we're on the Quicken Loan side, a mortgage company, we buy plants and we go on art hops around the city to different galleries and studios, and we do all kinds of things that are not mortgage related at all. And so don't kind of put yourself in a bucket to say that there's maybe not an opportunity for you there in some way.
Interesting. Now, Justin, one of the things that sort of stood out to me when I was reading about your background was this idea of collaboration among sectors. You wrote about that in your bio, and it seems to be something you're very passionate about. Do you have some perspective on how different maybe innovative companies or startup organizations from one sector to the other sector can come together, work together, and sort of really create something that's worthwhile? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs in Detroit have been innovative and collaborating for a long time now. I think at this point, some of the more interesting innovations taking place with the businesses and the organizations that support entrepreneurs.
Any examples?
Yeah, definitely. It's not the same starting a business or growing a business here as it is in many other places. So for a long time, you can't get lending, you can't get funding to start a business in Detroit. There's code and policies that are written for different times or different places. So now we're starting to see organizations that are coming up with new ways to get money to businesses, like Detroit Development Fund, for example. Even the city of Detroit, through Motor City Match, is finding ways to kind of catalyze and bring entrepreneurs and building owners together, speed tracking or fast tracking some of the code and permitting things that the businesses need to get up and going. So I think some of those support institutions are getting a lot better at collaborating with entrepreneurs.
So this idea of just speeding up the process, making this idea of starting up in Detroit an easier process.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult because a lot of the code that's written, a lot of the laws that are in place are meant to protect the public. It's for our own good. But I think in this context in Detroit, they end up being barriers. They raise the amount of investment and time that's needed to start a business. And it ends up turning back on itself and causing more harm than good. So it's not easy for folks to adjust to that. And I think that's where some of the really interesting things are happening.
Now, Randall, with the Eastern market, one of the things that's fascinating about the Eastern market is that it is for many entrepreneurs or small business owners, their sort of first shot, right? Their sort of first on the market opportunity. And as you think about entrepreneurs in distressed areas, one of the reasons that when I was at ICIC, the Initiative for Competitive Intercity, the one reason we looked to the market is because it was this great platform for entrepreneurs as a way to think about launching themselves and putting themselves out there. What types of resources are you or is the market providing to entrepreneurs to how to sort of help get them their start? And are there success stories that maybe you'd like to share with us a little bit?
Sure. Well, the most important thing we provide is a low barrier to entry. A place on a Saturday for $80 as a new vendor, you can set up and be in front of 30 to 40,000 people. So, basically you need an idea, you need a product, you need a license, health department or whatever if it's a food product, and $80. And there's very few other places that you can really get that kind of immediate feedback to find out if your product is going to work, if the customers are going to like it. We do that for food on Saturday. We do that for specialty goods, crafts and handmade goods on Sunday, which is something we started last year. So most importantly, that's, we are the place that it sort of comes together, where the crossroads where commerce and the customers meet. But we have a pretty holistic view of the whole process. So like I said, we partner with Michigan State Product Development Center, and then we launch along with Food Lab, Detroit Kitchen Connect, which is our kitchen at the Easter Market that we just finished construction. But it's also, before we even finished that, we worked with 2 neighborhood institutions to utilize their kitchen. So we kind of run the logistics for it. So, basically we do the scheduling to make sure everyone's licensed correctly and all of that. So we have those in the neighborhood because not everyone can get to the market. So we're really sort of the place where everyone comes together, and we are all about partnership. So we have a relationship with the Detroit Food Academy and the Food Policy Council and all these different groups all convene at the market.
So what I'm really hearing about is that you can sort of, maybe as a lesson or this takeaway as you start to think about this revitalization even of entrepreneurship here in Detroit, is this idea of public and private trying to figure this out, right? And try to figure out how do they work together. I was commenting on one of my students, I teach at NYU, and one of my students we were writing about on-ramp programs. And one of the things that he and I were in this heated back and forth debate forum about the importance of why you want it not just to be government driven, but also the idea that you got to have the private sector at the table as well in terms of creating these types of programs.
One of the cool things that happens at the market, and it's not planned, it's totally organic, is the vendors are next to each other for a really long time.
So they get to know each other.
They get to know each other, they start helping each other out. There's a gentleman that was basically a laid-off exhibit builder, and the people across the hall or across the aisle were making pies, and their setup wasn't that good. So he rebuilt the whole thing. He did their whole branding for them, and then they were on Andrew Zimmerman's Bizarre Foods. So it's that collaboration that.
So folks start to develop this really sort of sense of peer-to-peer community.
Yep.
So let's do this. I've got 3 or 4 questions that I want to ask everyone to sort of respond to, sort of in a lightning round type of thing. Just keep the answers really short. And we'll just go through them really quickly, because I think it'd be interested. You all represent different sectors and sort of different background. So we've heard a lot about this idea of the importance of entrepreneurship driving cities. And so the question I think that I come back to is, as we look to our cities, and maybe a place like Detroit, how do we encourage more entrepreneurship? What's the 1 or 2 things that we as a collective community can do to encourage entrepreneurship? And we'll start with Justin. You looked away from me, so I called you.
I don't know. I probably have a distorted view, but I don't think we need to encourage more entrepreneurship. I feel like everyone I meet is an entrepreneur or has an idea or is on the cusp of doing something. I think it's more about creating the infrastructure that allows them to succeed and helps that group succeed.
Uh-huh. Okay, interesting. What do you think?
I think the non-traditional programs like the Build Institute is a really wonderful program. There's always been Smart Track and Fast Track through the Small Business Administration, and some of them I think are kind of weighty, a little too serious, a little maybe a little antiquated. And some of the smaller programs that are more nimble, you get in, it's a quick 6-week program. You flush your ideas out, and you basically leave there knowing if you need to take it to the next step or go completely back to the drawing board. So I think those types of programs, and then the resources. And
so quick feedback is what I'm hearing.
Quick feedback, and then there's been a lot of really great programs that have come out, with through the DEGC and others that are all about grants. So giving people money.
So it's the capital.
With very few strings attached, though.
Yeah.
The whole microloan programs. I have hesitation because there's all sorts of strings. You have to have a great credit report and all these things. Mm. So the ones that are just quickly giving out the $5,000 to $10,000 to see if someone's idea can make it, I think it's worth the investment. And if they fail, it's okay.
It's almost like this idea of these sprout funds. Pittsburgh has something very similar to this, where they do very quick micro grants. What do you think, Melissa?
I think what's so important is to take the risk and to be supportive of it. And what I was amazed by when we started dPOP is just the attention that we got, the support that we have, and just the belief and interest in what we're doing in Detroit. I mean, we don't just have Detroit and local businesses that are our clients. We're in New York, we're San Francisco, we're in Atlanta right now, so we're all over, and it's just from the attraction of what's going on in Detroit. So, don't be surprised at how quickly it goes national.
Cool.
From my perspective, I think I agree with Justin as well, but I think at the same time there's exposure. I think there's part of the city, we're kind of siloed. We have different pockets, and there's people out in the community that have lived here their whole lives and that have been here for generations that aren't exposed to the idea of what entrepreneurship really is. They're at home and their parents are making and selling food out of their house.
Yeah.
And all of these things, just getting exposed to the idea that that can be a business, that can be a future, that is a way of creating your own stability, is something that I think is really powerful, but really reaching into the population that has been here through Detroit's highs and lows and all of that, because they're not getting exposed to it in the way that everybody in this room is really excited, has ideas, and thinks about the possibility of having a business. Not everybody has that privilege to be like, oh, my idea is good enough to be a business.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing. And then you can scale beyond that. We can reach the whole, well beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship is not just about job creation, about wealth creation, individual wealth creation too. I mean, that was a key thing that we always thought about at ICIC.
Individual stability.
Yeah, for
family
sure.
stability. That's like something a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
None of you mentioned schools. Any thoughts on this idea of entrepreneurship in schools?
No. I would actually add, I think the most important thing we can do to encourage entrepreneurs is actually bring in more immigrants. Number one is make Detroit more friendly for immigrants.
More immigrant friendly. Okay, interesting. So last question, and it sort of gets us to this idea of sharing lessons. And so, today we've heard a lot of lessons about other cities and how they apply to Detroit. So let's maybe just flip that and maybe go down the line. Veronika, we'll start with you this time. You're up to bat first. As you look at Detroit's startup community or in sort of entrepreneurship collaborations, are there lessons learned, good or bad, right, that you take from Detroit that you could say, man, these are things that we've learned from being here as an entrepreneur in Detroit that I'd say other cities wake up and think about these issues?
As far as issues that the city faces?
Yeah, or issues that the startup community, lessons learned from the startup community.
Well, within the nonprofit startup community, which is its own little ecosystem, but
It is.
starting out for us, it was recognizing what we were really good at and narrowing in on that, because there are so many agencies that we see that do almost the same thing, especially in the nonprofit space, that refuse to collaborate. And they're struggling and they're competing for the same dollars, they think. And they would be so much more powerful if they both recognized what they were both contributing and how they were different, or if they weren't, to collaborate on it, to have even more impact. I think for me, it was to continue to narrow and hone it in, especially in the startup community. Sometimes we can get to be like Swiss Army knives, where we try to tackle so many things, because Detroit, let's be honest, does face a lot of issues that when you start up a business can be tough. And so you try to tackle all of those things and do everything, but not quite hone in exactly on what you're best at. And for me, that was the biggest thing that we've kept on trying to focus and focus and focus.
So the thing I heard is develop mechanisms for better collaborations amongst entrepreneurs and folks in the community. And maybe for the individual entrepreneur in other places, it's focus. Be very, very focused on what you are good at, what your advantages are, maybe.
Because there's so many agencies that are out there doing it well. Like for us, we just do the job side. There's people that do GED and college prep. And so we just plug in and work with them. It makes them stronger because they have guaranteed clients, but also at the same time, it improves what we do.
Great. Melissa.
I would say something that I think that is so important and should be looked at for Detroit is the attraction of talent. And I think that for us, we are so fortunate in the talent base that we have, and so many either students or graduates or folks who are honestly, starting a second or third career, that are taking a look at the opportunities that are building here, that we have this amazing talent pool, whether it's on a trade side or craftsmanship or the tech industry. I'm amazed at how many resumes we get on a daily basis, floored by it. So the people are here.
The people are here. Okay, great.
I would say it's not necessarily what we've done, but what we could do, and I agree with Justin in terms of the regulations. I definitely believe regulations and zoning and all that, a lot of that is set up to protect us, keep people safe. And I think, under the current mayor, they're beginning to address it on a systematic approach. If you're a business owner or building owner and you get visited by one inspector on a Monday, from plumbing and electrical on a Tuesday, and each one of those inspections costs $150, $200. So I think, the city is actually starting to look at those things. with electric and all the utilities and all that, there are things that the city can actually streamline and learn from other places to make it easier to be an entrepreneur in this.
So this idea of simplification, simplification, simplification.
Yep, and
Pulling down the barriers.
collaboration and working together. The city needs to talk to each other. Different departments need to talk to each other.
Sure. Justin, last word.
Yeah, I think there's this growing understanding that business growth and development needs to be inclusive. I don't think this is unique to Detroit, but I think it's especially important in a place like Detroit. But I don't know that that's always an easy or obvious thing. I don't know that entrepreneurs are always equipped to answer those questions while in the heat of growing their business. Mm-hmm. So I think socially minded companies like the Empowerment Plan, for example, where that's sort of deeply woven into the fabric of what the business is, could probably be good at sharing some of those lessons. Mm-hmm. But I also think for businesses that aren't necessarily nonprofits, or someone's just starting a coffee shop or whatever, I think there's a whole set of tactics and strategies there that could be shared. It'd be really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about this idea of inclusiveness, it may not be the entrepreneur who's thinking about inclusiveness. I mean, they should, in terms of as they're growing their business, but it could be city government agencies, resource providers. How do you make the barriers to entry, as many of you have suggested, lower and be much more community-oriented, bringing people together? Well, great. Well, thank you very much. Time's running short, so I just want to thank Melissa, Justin, Randall, and Veronika. Please join me in them they're sharing their perspectives with us.